My uncle, the infamous ring announcer Jimmy Lennon Sr., lived a life that was wrapped in myths, legends, and tall tales. The stories boggle the mind, like the time he, as a teenager, struck out the mighty Babe Ruth. This I have to find out about. I'm a Venice, California-born, Los Angeles-based sports fan, one that has played, coached, announced, and promoted sports my whole life. My love affair with sports started in my own backyard and has led me to this podcast. Thanks to the support of the Amateur Athletic Union in East Bay, I'm excited to bring you Sports Stories with Denny Lennon. Hello, sports historians. As our days number in the weeks and months, the coronavirus challenge that surrounds us reminds us we must support one another, stay together, and overcome this pandemic. Welcome to video, audio, podcast, episode 29 of Sports Stories with Denny Lennon. So, did my Uncle Jim strike out the great Babe Ruth? Well, that answer and more awaits as part 2 of a 4-part interview with the Hall of Fame boxing announcer Jimmy Lennon Jr. awaits. But first, it's time for me to introduce the producer of today's show, the director of the FBL 5 slate of shows, the all-time women's volleyball assist leader at New Mexico State, my quarantine partner for life, my wife, Christine. Jimbo!
Hi, everybody. Okay, I'm just here to remind you of 3 things and 3 things only. If you can remember these 3 things, you can find us anywhere. SportsStoriesPodcast.com, that's number 1. Number 2 is Sports Stories with Denny Lennon. That's Denny like the restaurant, Lennon like the Beatle. And number 3 on Twitter, Sports Stories DL. Those are the 3 things, and you can find us. Subscribe, find us, like us, do all that kind of stuff. We love it, and we love you too.
Well played. Hey, yeah, we're going 5 days a week, and we're really getting after it. One thing that's going to be a lot of fun, on April 29th, Sports Stories with Denny Lennon has been chosen to host the AAU Sullivan Awards show. So that'll be the 90th time that the most prestigious amateur award in the country is given out, and we get to do it on our channel. So there'll be a lot of information about that at Sports Stories Podcast coming up April 29th. In this part 2 of 4 with Jimmy Lennon Jr., we discuss his past career as a teacher and school administrator, his mantra of only being as good as his last performance, his ability to introduce fighters in various languages, and the roles he played, like in the 1991 movie Hot Shots with Charlie Sheen, and an episode of the runaway television hit Highway to Heaven with Michael Landon, and guest star Sammy Davis Jr. Oh yeah, I just referenced the world's greatest entertainer ever, the Candyman himself, Sammy Davis Jr. Well, speaking of Junior, I think it's time. Hello, fight fans, now back for round 2 of his historic 4-part interview in the world-famous 7428 studio. It's the International Hall of Fame ring announcer, Jimmy Lennon Jr. Please note, this interview was recorded on January 28th, 2020. The other thing that's kind of fun is the story about your dad, 1927, striking out Babe Ruth. Do you know more details than I do about that? Or
you probably know more than I do, but I'll start and you fill it in. So he won some sort of contest to pitch against Babe Ruth. And he faced him 3 times in the baseball field, and the 3rd time he struck him out.
Okay.
And, what a thrill and everything, and it was over, and my dad realized, I don't have a picture of that. So he grabbed a photographer, found a photographer, and hunted down Babe Ruth, who was playing golf. And I have the picture at home, my dad in his baseball outfit, and Babe Ruth in his golfing outfit, because this was hours afterwards, and it's with him, pretending like throwing a pitch, Babe Ruth holding a bat. My dad must have made sure he had a bat too, and it was assigned
so smart
to Jimmy. You throw a wicked curveball, Babe Ruth.
Goodness gracious! And you still have that photo?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh wow! What? That's an heirloom.
A wicked curveball.
Are you kidding? Babe Ruth.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so how old was my dad? 14 at the
Must
time?
have been about 14. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is something. Well, the part that I always crack me up is as I read through his clippings in the local newspapers, they'll talk about him hosting this fight or hosting this event or whatever, and no matter what, they would have to tag it with. And this is, as a schoolboy, he struck out Babe Ruth because your dad would carry that around and show it to him. It goes right there.
He was awfully proud of that.
God, that's so good.
Childhood
Are you kidding?
accomplishment.
It's him. He had all these groundbreaking things to the sport, to the ring, but he was posthumously put into the International Hall of Fame?
International Boxing Hall of Fame.
And I'm wondering why they didn't do that while he's still alive. Do you know?
No, and I can't dwell on it. First of all, the International Boxing Hall of Fame wasn't real big when he was still announcing at the same time. So
Okay.
it developed and it grew after the years. And then I think his accomplishments maybe faded a little bit because the time had passed, and it was more of at that point also more of an East Coast, is in Canastota, New York, and more of an East Coast emphasis. And so I don't dwell on
Sure.
that as much as they righted something wrong, and he
Yeah,
deservingly
they sure did.
was there. So it was, I think it was 2015, I believe was the year. Could be wrong.
Okay.
But
It's great.
well after he passed.
It's great he's in there, and I think
Yeah.
I saw you quoted somewhere like years from now, people won't know that it was
Exactly.
posthumous.
Right.
Yeah, they'll just know he's in there.
Yes.
Which is terrific. So you had graduated college, and did you immediately take a teaching job?
What I did is I had a tough time finding work because I studied psychology, and you get nothing with that. And so I ended up substitute teaching just to keep busy. It was a tough time in life for me. And I substituted, and I was offered a job, and I said no. And then one of the nicest things is I read there were some teacher evaluations at the end of the semester, and I was ready to move on because I was a long-term substitute. Someone had left. I think it was pregnancy, and so I took over some classes. And some of the students wrote some things to me, and they showed them to me, and it was so touching. I said, all right, I'll come back next year. This is kind of nice. I ended up loving it. And
Okay.
all things, I mean, I haven't told many people this, but all things equal, I loved it more than boxing, announcing. And I feel like I have one of the best jobs in the world being an announcer, but I really enjoyed it, having an impact on kids, as you know, just the day-to-day, making a change, helping someone, was really important to me, and I just loved it. So
Yeah.
I had to give it up because I had to choose. I had a family to raise, and one was much more lucrative than the other.
How did you get on the track to becoming a principal or a headmaster?
And then
How did you get
it's a
on
private
that track?
school, so yeah, it was a very small school, and they asked
West
me
LA
to
Baptist?
West LA Baptist School. We had one of our Christmas parties there. I don't know if
we
you recall.
did. I do.
And my wedding was there. And they asked me, they were looking for new principals, and they asked me to throw my hat. And basically I said, if you find someone more equipped, hire them. I'm fine with what I'm doing. And if not, I'll accept it. And so that's how it happened. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Sounds like the Catholic schools that I worked at. Once they see a little competency in you in
Yes.
one area,
Yeah.
they start to add some things to you.
Keep you around.
and they don't add to they don't add to your paycheck, but they
No.
certainly add to your workload.
No,
Yeah, I
no.
know that drill. So you then at the same time you were learning the announcing game with your father.
Concurrently, yes. And I think it was also
Mid-70s, late 70s?
No, this would be
No,
the
like
80s, early
Okay.
80s.
Okay.
And I think me, leaving UCLA with not a real strong career direction, I would go with my dad, and he'd pay me some money to interview the fighters. So I'd start by going in, talking to the fighters, interviewing them, giving my notes to my dad, and then eventually I would announce a fight. So it was pretty much that same time period where I was, starting to teach also. And so it was an opportunity, and I say, hey, I like a little money. This is all right. And then I would announce a few fights. and I would get a lot of acceptance. A lot, some might say following in your dad's footsteps would be very difficult, but people liked my dad so much that they were really nice to me, really welcoming, and I think that had a big impact also on me. Like the notes from the students who enjoyed me teaching, I think I responded a lot to the kind comments.
Do you remember your first time in the ring, having to announce a fight, undercard or whatever?
Yeah, I was wearing a suit. I really didn't stand in the center of the ring. I sat a little bit closer to the ropes, and if I recall, and I don't. The first fighter had the craziest nickname. And his nickname was Bucket of Blood. So here I am, this young guy starting announcing, and I'm announcing this.
You're like, are you sure this
Bucket
is right?
of Blood. And I ended up meeting his trainer not too long ago. He says, "Oh yeah, I remember Bucket of Blood. He was a really good guy, but yeah, he was a little bit crazy." And
Bucket of Blood, nice. I remember out of the backyard. I think you have a different experience with your dad. Well, a little bit, anyways, because I think I know why. But so I was in the backyard calling those games, and then this women's pro beach volleyball decided to break away from being on the same courts as the men's because they weren't being treated fairly. So they formed the Women's Pro Volleyball Association. They invited me to come be the same because they found me in the backyard. So they said, "Come out." And the very first time I went up, the tournament director turned to me and said, "I don't know who you are, but if you're not any good, I'll have you off by lunch."
Gee.
And I went, "Oh, hi, I'm Denny." Okay, so that was my, and I did well enough that by lunch they go, "Hey, our next one's in Hawaii. Do you want to go?" And I said, "Yeah." So then I did that for a few years, but I'm only my fourth event. Come back to Venice. Your dad went, and he sat, and I didn't notice, but he had a notepad, and he sat for a lot of the day, and this is like in the 90s, 90, 89. And so he came backstage, and I was like, "Hey, Uncle Jim," I was proud. I could not believe Uncle Jim came to see me announce. And I was like, "Hey, Uncle Jim," he goes, "You got a second, boy?" And I go, "Sure." He goes, "So I got a couple notes here." And he told me everything I said wrong, how I had some things out of order, so on and so forth. Gave me a couple compliments, but that's what I remembered. Wow. And he ended with, "And whatever you do, son, don't embarrass the family." I went, "Whoa." But you know what it was? It was that tough love. He was like, "I spent the day here, and I'm not going to come every time, but this one time, I'm going to teach you what I can." And it made me so much better because everything he said I remembered, and I started to pay attention much more closely to those things.
Wow.
And it made me 100% better. And I've always been so thankful for that. I never got a chance to go back up to him and go, "Did you know? I actually got a lot better, Uncle Jim."
Oh, that's really something.
Yeah, he was something.
Yeah, you know what? It was, I think, the opposite for me. And I don't know why, but when he was sick and not doing well, and he would stay home, and I'd take over some of his work, or even when we worked together, he would have a little piece of paper with notes on it. But I'm so grateful, maybe because he knew me better, he would go through everything I did right. And he said, "Good job doing this, and you did this, and then at the end he'd say, sometimes you may want to think about putting the nickname at the beginning instead of the middle." And that might be it for his recommendations, but it was all very positive.
Nice. He had a slow roll up with you.
I think he maybe his age.
And also, I think he was like, "No, I'm going to give him what I got now." And because this is be the time I see him. I mean, Uncle Bill lived 2 houses down from me, and I used to call him Grandpa because he taught me so much about sports, right? I would go down there, and he would just show me how to play ball. But I just remember he always was very concise, cut to the chase, and it worked for me. And But I do remember that's pivotal to me on getting better. He told me something about concise, clear, and correct. You have 3 C's when you have that microphone, son. Concise, clear, and correct, and just all those things. They stuck with me to this day.
Wow,
learning how to speak properly. It was pretty.
That's really something. How he saw that role in his life
for me
to give to you.
It was great.
We interrupt this podcast to bring you a commercial from our sponsor, Casablanca.
Casablanca Restaurant in Venice, California. Proud sponsor of Sports Stories with Denny Lennon. Also sponsoring the Facebook Live at 5 Friday show.
Margaritas.
That's right. Carlos is kind enough at Casablanca to package up like a to-go, what they're selling, right? To-go. What is in it? It's like that taco bar?
Daily deal. He does basically a taco bar with 2 different meats, beans, rice, tortillas. It's fantastic.
Brilliant. And then you throw in the margaritas with that. And if you watch our Friday show, you'll see that we cheers one another. He sends one over to Venice, where Marley and the Rices are hosting part of the show, over here to the 7428 studio.
And
where
any
we do
local
it.
guests
And any local guest. Doug O'Neill.
benefit as well.
Doug O'Neill, the Triple Crown winner, horse trainer, is a new big fan. So, thank you, Carlos. You can call Carlos at 310-505-5091. Again, 310-505-5091. Call Carlos. Ask him for the Sports Stories with Denny Lennon special. He's going to throw in margaritas or a big percentage off.
Vámonos a Casablanca, vámonos a Casablanca, vámonos a Casablanca, la comida para la familia. Vámonos a Casablanca, vámonos a Casablanca.
And now back to our interview with Jimmy Lennon Jr.
So first big gigs, like when did that start to happen? So about when did you get your first ones where you were?
Well, okay, so my first world title fight, now call it big, ended up being the first world title fight of boxing great Julio Cesar Chavez. And that was, I think, in '84. And when you go to Mexico, they will talk about the exact date of that fight because it's a big part of history because such a tremendous champion. So that was a real big gig for me. If I recall, my father was elsewhere doing another big fight, but I did that fight at the Olympic Auditorium. So that was
right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But by that time I had done so many fights because I used to do amateur fights in hotel pool yard grounds, and I'd be 25 fights that night or that day, and the next day I'd do 25 more, and I had done so many fights, I didn't feel like a newcomer.
Tell me about some of those places.
Yeah,
you're in a tux, everybody else there, not exactly?
No, not exactly. And, I'd get in the ring, and, a lot of people, amateur boxing is not a big deal. They just have some guy say their name who's in a T-shirt at ringside, but I'd get in the ring and do the whole spiel, and it's good training for me.
Yeah,
I did a lot.
You had to learn to win over different types of audiences.
Absolutely, and I did, but I came in with a mindset of what I should do, how it should be done, the correct way to do it. The only way I knew was watching my father, so I didn't think anything but dress nicely, get in the ring, present the guys as best as I could, interview them beforehand, make sure I pronounce their name correctly, make sure I know where they're from, what they want, what's their real hometown, and
that's great,
and everything. So
you did, yeah. That I often say that about athletes that grow up in an environment where their dad's either a coach or an athlete, and all they ever see and know is the game played at a high level. And so I've talked to some that are advanced in like Karch Krai, for instance, the great volleyball player, right? He said, I was only around really good players. I was lucky that like club volleyball didn't exist, so I wasn't around a bunch of other 12-year-olds that were flailing. I was only around older guys that could really play the sport. So that's all his visual, that's all that was drained into him. And I mean, you had a similar type of upbringing when it came to announcing. You had the best right in front of you.
And people said, have you tried to imitate his style or copy him and so forth? No, not really. It's what I was around. And so that's all I knew.
That makes sense. How many, so you mentioned about dressing nice. How many tuxes you got?
Yeah.
Do people ask you this all the time?
Sometimes, yeah. I did have, the worst question I've ever been asked was, do you own your own tux? It was years ago. But
no, I got a sponsorship with Al's Tuxedo Rentals.
No, I don't know. The styles change, and I put some away.
Sure.
And I don't know. I probably have about 8 or so. I don't know, something like that. Change
Yeah,
the tie and the shirt.
Now I know you stayed about the same size. So have you ever come back to ones from way back that are kind of like either throwback or they've come back in style?
No, I haven't.
That'd
I
be
really
interesting.
haven't. Yeah, I haven't. It would be interesting, but at one point I just lose space and I say, no,
You're
I
out.
got to move it along.
You're out.
And,
Tell me a little bit about the whole routine for a big fight, and then I want to ask you some about your other big fights. So there's the weigh-in. Is that the first time you're kind of in effect on the clock, or is there preparation before the weigh-in about how that's going to go, and how like integral are you to the whole process?
Yeah, and it all depends on the size of the fight. If we're talking about a big pay-per-view fight like a Mayweather-Pacquiao or something like that, I'll show up even for production meetings beforehand. We'll talk about, get things coordinated. And certainly before the weigh-in, I do a lot of preparation. I mean, I over-prepare. I don't really need to, but I want to be ready and do the best I can, because I have this sense of me, I'm only as good as my last performance, and I'm judged on that only, and it's, So in any case, I prepare for the weigh-in a lot, and then I go there, and so I'll present the fighters, and then, that's it. When I was younger and smaller fights, I would always go to the arena, interview each of the fighters. Like I said, pronounce their name properly, what's their nickname, where they're from, the hometown, check their colored trunks. And for the bigger fights, there's a whole staff doing that. And so in some ways, I feel a little out of it. I really used to enjoy talking to each of the fighters.
Yeah.
I still do that if there's a difficult name or a something I need to have answered. I'll go into the dressing rooms. And some of them are friends, and so I'll wish them the best. And so I'll show up early to the fight night.
Has any of those weigh-ins gotten a little crazy where you were worried that they were going to take their antics and you were going to get involved in the middle?
Oh, yeah.
Because you're right there.
Yeah, it happens a lot. I mean, they're
they
pushing
could just
and
be
the
messing
shoving.
around. And
Yeah. And some places are a little bit better controlled. I just did a fight with Gervonta Davis and Uriokis Gamboa. And it was a sweltering hot room, overcrowded stage, not enough security. They got into a shoving match, and so. But I don't need to deal with that. I just walk out. I mean, I don't.
And word's out there that Jimmy Jr. will kick your ass.
There you go.
They know. They know.
And in terms of weigh-ins, Macho Camacho used to love to just take everything off on the big stage and step on the scale. I mean, now, they'll weigh in their trunks, and if you need to, if you're a quarter pound off, they'll bring out the towel and take off the underwear. And he would just,
that's so funny.
he was just crazy. So plenty of those antics as well.
Okay, so before I ask you about some of your big fights, you've picked up some TV and film. So you've done Hot Shots?
Yeah.
And I Spy?
Yes.
Were you on set for much more than your shot, or do you have to be there like all day, the whole week?
Oh yeah, it's quite long, to be there ready. Hot Shots, I even remember going in reading for the script. They had a room with a large U-shaped table, and everyone took the script and read their parts. And it was so funny to see, the director said, okay, everyone just say your name, what role you're playing, and I don't know, where you went to high school. And so everyone would go around the room, and, Charlie Sheen is saying, well, I'm playing this, and I went to high school at Samo. I didn't graduate, but, and all these famous actors saying that. So, yeah, and then being there, it's a 2-3 day process, no matter how small the role is. I did Southpaw recently.
Jake Gyllenhaal, right?
Yeah. And again, a very small part, but they're on set for 2-3 days, and in Hot Shots. And
we like to consider ourselves in the pop culture the show of record for 80s television. And I want you to know where I really became proud of you is finding out that you're in an episode of Hunter. Oh. Look out. Fred Dreyer holding down as Rick Hunter.
I kind of forgot about that.
Sammy Davis Jr. with an eye patch.
Yes,
played a very convincing cornerman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I
and
recall.
the other one is Highway to Heaven.
Yeah.
Fighting for Your Life. Was that your first one? Looked like it was early.
It was early, but not my first. My very first was, I think, the Ray Boom Boom Mancini story, made for TV and made for NBC. Okay. Yeah, I really kind of forgot about those. But you did not mention Married with Children, or are you getting to that later?
Well, that's the 90s. That's the next generation down was watching that. Not that I did. Was that one a little bit longer? Like, did they give you a little more shtick?
Yeah, and I wasn't a ring announcer. I was a ringside commentator for wrestling.
Okay.
And I'll never forget, there was a wrestler versus the girl in it. I can't remember her name, but
Christina Applegate. That
Christina
that role?
Applegate's character,
Uh-huh.
and she was a bumblebee, dressed in my big line was, "Look at the hiney on that honey."
Classic. Oh, and I'm about to look that up. I like that stuff. Did Michael Landon cry in your Highway to Heaven episode? Do you know? Because he cried an awful lot on television.
Yeah, I think he did. Yeah.
That'll make it. That'll make it for you. So, do you get a lot of questions about not only your dad but like the Lennon sisters and other parts of the family when you're getting interviewed, or I've found that just in conversations with people, it's starting to fade now.
Sure.
And
it's the older folks who would just tell me how much they were in love with Janet or whatever.
Yeah.
And
yes. That one always seems to come up.
Yeah, and but a lot more when I started and less now. But I'm so proud of them.
Yeah, it's great.
Happy to fill them in on everything I know.
Yeah, it's fun. You speak Spanish?
A little bit.
And Maori, is that how you say it? The New Zealand language or something? Did I read that somewhere?
No, that might have been made up.
That's Strike Force? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that might have something to do.
What I do is I try to welcome, whenever I go to foreign countries, welcome in their language as much as I can. And it fools some people thinking I speak a lot more than I do. Mm-hmm. So I've done it in Indonesian, Japanese, German, French, Spanish, of course.
That's cool.
Russian, Turkish as well. There's a funny story with the Turkish one, because I went to Ankara, Turkey to do a fight. They hadn't had boxing there in a couple generations. And so I arrived the morning of the fight, and I see a waiter setting up the table and in the restaurant. It's like 5 a.m, and so I say, "Hey, how do you say, and to all of my Turkish friends, good evening and welcome." And I recorded him saying it a couple times. So then I went to my room, went to got some sleep, and I played it and recorded it. And so I get introduced, another announcer does the undercard.
Okay.
Now, Turkey's not good friends with Americans. And so I'm introduced as to announce, the rest of the parts, American announcer, Jimmy Lennon Jr., and they all booed me. And
did they think you said Armenian?
No, they were, it was a number of years ago. And then I, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome. And then I gave my Turkish welcome, and they all cheered.
Oh.
And I felt like I really won them over. So as much as I can do that, I'll do that. And
wow.
I like
somebody could set you up if you're not careful when you don't know the language.
That's true.
So is that the process? It goes, you have somebody say it into a recorder, and then you just listen to it over and over again?
Oh, it all depends. It all depends. When I was going
really
to Indonesia, I was sitting next to an Indonesian professor, and I said, "Oh, by the way," this might have been the first time I did it as well, if not in Spanish, in another language. And I said, "How would you say this?" And we just went over that. And
how does your mind hear it? Do you can't read it, so do you just gotta hear it? Do you break it down?
I would put it phonetically. I think I might even remember it, and this was like 20 some years ago. In Indonesian, you repeat to plural. It's a pretty easy language. When you pluralize something, you repeat it. So ladies is bapak. Lady is bapak. Ladies is bapak.
Okay.
So I say bapak dan ibu-ibu selamat malam kepada para penggemar tinju di Indonesia.
Brilliant.
And that was my welcome.
And that's enough for the whole crowd to go, "Hey,
they loved it.
This guy's one of us."
Yeah.
Oh,
I got away with
good.
it. Yeah.
And you've done that in so many languages.
Yeah, a lot of languages.
Pretty awesome. Wow, that's really good. Now it's time for an installment of As Time Goes By, where we get to know Carlos Haro Jr. of Casablanca Restaurant in Venice 1 minute at a time. Now, let's play it again with Carlos Jr. Your 8th grade teacher was Miss Dolan.
Yes.
And she happens to be the lead researcher for Sports Stories with Denny Lennon.
Yes, she
is. She had a favorite book that the class would read each year, and she taught from. Do you know the name of that book?
I should have, but I don't think I ever read it.
To Kill a Mockingbird, ring a bell?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. Who was the author of Kill a Mockingbird?
The author's last name is Lee.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember her first name. Harper, thank you.
All right, okay. Partial credit there.
Okay.
All right. Sports Stories with Denny Lennon is supported by the AAU. Find a local event and join at aausports.org. And remember, you can catch your favorite amateur sports live stream, replays, and highlights at ballertv.com. Sports Stories, along with East Bay, supports the Heroes Movement, a nonprofit that bridges the gap from mental or physical therapy to getting strong again through strength and conditioning workouts. This free service is available for any veteran of the United States Armed Forces. Visit heroesmovementusa.org for more information. Sports Stories, along with thousands of people across the country, also supports the My Stuff Bags Foundation, a nonprofit that provides traumatized children with new belongings and new hope. Learn more at mystuffbags.org. Sports Stories with Denny Lennon is a production of Sports Stories, Inc. and is available on Apple Podcasts and YouTube or wherever you listen and watch. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and give us a review. It really helps spread the word. You can find all our social media links, archives, and other info on our website at sportsstoriespodcast.com. Special thanks to the John R. Wooden Course and Wooden's Wisdom. Original music for Sports Stories is courtesy of Lennon Music Productions. Original images by Sienna Lennon Photography. Sports Stories is produced by Christine Jimbo and Marley Rice. Sports Stories is edited by Bob McCall. Additional staff include Ray Castro, Teresa Dolan, Jake Downey, Carlos Haro, and Buck Magic Lennon.
Looking for a good time? Sports Stories with Denny Lennon. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Fridays, 5 o'clock, Facebook. Thursday is a podcast, a live podcast, on YouTube. See you there.
Check it out, Buck.